It was already getting dark, even though it was barely past 4. Patrick looked at his clipboard, taking stock of the supplies his squad had unloaded for the day. 8 pallets of civilian rations, so that's 800 boxes. He circled around each pallet, verifying that they were all there. And 12 crates of medical supplies. Patrick counted each of the crates carefully. It would be his ass if one went missing. Satisfied with the count, he signed his name at the bottom and nodded towards the Takaran soldiers who were patiently waiting. They were quick to get to work, loading the supplies onto wagons to be taken to the other side. "How many truckloads was that today?" Tanner groaned. 7. Only 7 today, David answered, as he took a seat on a rock that was protruding from the ground. "We have 10 tomorrow, so make sure you get some rest tonight," Patrick said coldly. After the Marines left New Hope, only a skeleton crew was left behind, so they had called some of the Canadians to help with unloading supplies for the Dakar. Patrick's squad was one of the lucky few to get selected for the task. It's not like they were doing much anyways, not after the incident on the other side. "Wait, tomorrow?" Tyr asked. "Aren't the Americans getting back today? Shouldn't they take our place?" "Have you not heard what happened?" David said, looking up at Tanner. "They butted heads with an entire Veek army. Some were even encircled for a couple of days." "I heard it was the biggest fight they'd been in since Fallujah," Martin added. Tanner's eyes widened. Holy shit! No wonder just about the whole battalion went in after the first couple days. "There's no need to be spreading rumours," Patrick said with a sigh. "I'm sure we'll all find out what happened soon enough through the proper sources." He tucked the clipboard under his arm. "Now go and get some rest. We're starting at 0900 tomorrow and I don't want to be out here past dark." Tanner and Martin were quick to leave to go do whatever they had planned for the night, but David stayed back. "Sergeant," he started, "do you think Campos and them were over there in Eflond?" "I don't know, but it seems more than likely. Why'd you ask?" "Well, we haven't seen them since we left with the envoy. I guess I'm just wondering how they're doing," David lamented. "I'm sure they're fine, David. Campos is a smart guy," Patrick reassured him. "Now get going. The sun will be below the horizon in about an hour or so." David nodded, suddenly thinking it over. He then stood up and walked towards the tents. Patrick couldn't help but think about Campos since David mentioned him. He quickly brushed the thought from his mind. He hadn't seen the last of him, he was sure of that. Patrick started to stroll back to his tent, wondering what was for dinner. Hardust strained his eyes at the bright lights. An antiseptic scent filled his nose. Everything was blurry and his eyelids almost stuck to his eyes. He blinked repeatedly to clear his vision. As it came to him, he made out a figure standing next to his bed. The pale and slightly pink of his skin and the dark mass atop his head clued him into the fact that the figure was human. "Good morning, Fuzzball," the human said. "Welcome back to the world of the living." He recognized the voice instantly. It was unmistakable. Campos? "Who else? I did say I'd look out for you, didn't I?" Campos's grin became clear as Hardust's eyes focused on him. The scout looked around the unfamiliar room. The walls and ceiling were a drab white, and machines he couldn't identify were placed everywhere. It was clear he was in some kind of human facility, possibly medical in nature. Am I on Earth?" Hardust asked curiously. Campos scratched the back of his head as he answered, "Yeah, you are. It's somewhat of a long story." Hardust looked around once more. It was just the two of them. "Where is Lotrin?" He tried to get out of bed, but Campos stopped him. "She's safe. Don't worry, I'll make sure of that." Hardust began to relax after hearing she was safe. After all they had been through, he trusted Campos's words. "Why are we on Earth? What happened in Eflond?" "That's a bit of a long story. You've been unconscious for about 5 days now. The doctors have been easing off the meds to try and wake you." The scout dropped his head back and stared at the ceiling. 5 days? He lost almost an entire week. It was mind-boggling. Campos dropped his head and looked to the floor. Yeah, like I said, you missed a lot. He presented a stack of folded fabric, placing it on the bedside. I brought you some clothes. Why don't you get dressed, and I'll explain everything. Hardust was still processing the fact he had been unconscious for so long. It took him a moment to understand what Campos had said. Huh? Oh, yes, of course. Thank you. The squad leader nodded, then stood up. I'll be waiting outside. Just come out when you're done. He then stepped outside of the room, closing the door behind him. Hardust sat up. The pain in his wounds was dull from whatever medicine he was on. He craned his head down into his hands and massaged his face. Tiredness wasn't particularly gripping him at the moment, but it still helped with organizing his thoughts. He pulled himself out of bed and stood with some difficulty. Some pain still lingered from his injuries. He placed a hand on his bandages. His legs felt weak and dumb. He guessed it was probably just stiffness, so he began to walk. After some pacing around, Hardust looked at the clothing Campos had brought him. They were strange, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He remembered that he never really saw what the average human civilian wore. Hardust figured Campos knew what he was doing when he gave him these clothes, so he began to pull them on. First, he stood on the grey, hooded sweatshirt. He then grabbed the denim pants, but he stopped. Human pants wouldn't work for him on account of his tail. Hardust went to toss the pants on the bed when his fingers slipped through an unexpected hole in the pants. After a quick inspection, he realized that a tail hole had been carefully added for him. He couldn't help but laugh about it. Campos had clearly put some effort into this. He put on the rest of the clothing, including a new pair of boots. It all fit well enough, though it wasn't what he was used to. Once dressed, Hardust stepped out into the hall where Campos was waiting. Does everything fit all right? The Marine asked. Yes, it does. I can tell you put a lot of effort into getting me these clothes. Hardust tugged on the sweatshirt. The material is high quality as well, at least by current standards. Well, that's good. Glad you're happy with it. Oh, and one more thing. Campos handed over a paper bag that made a rattling sound when moved. This is for the pain. Just start taking them when your wounds start hurting. Hardust looked at the bag in his hand before stuffing it in his pocket. Much appreciated. He then looked up at Campos. So, about what happened in Eflond. Yeah, of course. Let's walk and talk. Campos started down the hallway, waving for Hardust to follow, to which he did. So, I guess I should start the day we went in. Our incursion into the city stopped the Feek advance in its tracks almost immediately. They really stood no chance, even against our relatively small force. However, by the end of the day, several squads, including ours, had been encircled. Many lost radio contact as well. All that caused the higher-ups on the human side to call in reinforcements. After some pressure on your matriarch, the rest of the Marine battalion went in. The two turned into a stairwell and made their way down. They had arrived in Eflon the night before we got rescued, starting operations that morning. A large medical station was also set up to assist the current forces. By that point, the Feek force had been all but neutered from assaulting the encircled squads. Believe it or not, we didn't even get the worst of it. By the time the others went in, it was all but a sweep. Casualty estimates put their losses at nearly 80%. Finally, they reached the main lobby and walked to the front door. Anyways, that's all that happened while we were there, Campos concluded, as they stepped outside into the cold air. It was dark, but Hardust couldn't tell if it was early or late at night. There was a large concrete field filled with vehicles of all shapes and colours. Where are we? Hardust saw several buildings not too far away. Is this one of your cities? Well, kind of. Campos led him into the concrete field. We're currently on a military base just outside the town of Fairbanks. The base is called Fort Wainwright, which all of this is a couple 100 miles west from New Hope. I see. Is that where we are headed now? Into town? Hardust asked. Yeah, the guys are out eating right now. We're going to link up with them. Campos reached into his pocket and pulled out a keyring as they approached one of the parked vehicles. It was somewhat larger than the others around it. It looked as though several humans could fit in it. Most of all, the vehicle vaguely reminded him of the Humvees, but it was a lot more rounded and ergonomic. Campos reached out with the keyring and the vehicle chirped, which startled Hardust. What kind of vehicle is that? Hardust asked curiously. Campos opened the driver's side door and looked up at him. Oh, right. This is a minivan. Most civilian vehicles don't look anything like military ones. He seated himself inside the vehicle and pressed a button. The minivan roared to life and lit up. Well, come on. We ought to get going. All right, Hardust said, as he moved to the passenger side and climbed in. To his surprise, there was much more space in there than the Humvee, despite being a smaller vehicle overall. He reached over and pulled the seatbelt over himself while Campos closed his door. So, Hardust started. What happened after we got rescued? To be honest, not much. The vehicle started suddenly moving. After a few days, we had to completely pull out as per the agreement we made with your government. We got our people, our mission was over. The only humans allowed near the portal now are the ones transporting aid. Command thought it was the perfect opportunity to give us a break, so they sent us here. So that is it for human intervention then, Hardust mused. I guess I figured that I expected more to come from this. Yeah, that's it, Campos echoed. Until the powers that be decide it's time for us to go back. Hardust looked outside at the passing buildings. Do you believe that will ever happen? It depends on how the Veek act. It's likely they will try diplomatic proceedings with them one way or the other, but based on what I know of them, that likely won't go too well. Then you'll likely see much more involvement from us. I think even entertaining the idea of diplomatic relations with the Veek is a very foolish thing to do, Hardust scoffed. They are brutes who only wish death and pain upon us. Gods, you have seen it yourself. I know, the Marine conceded. But there's a way us humans do things, and it's like that for good reason. If we shot first and asked questions later, do you think human-to-car relations would be what they are now? Hardust sighed. I understand that, but this is clearly different. Maybe so. But there's still a right and wrong way to go about things, Campos said adamantly. Procedure and rules are what separates us from the animals, even if we may think that it's not the easiest or best option. I don't think I will ever understand you humans, Hardust grudgingly admitted. When you are faced with a clear evil, you try to reason instead of do the sensible thing and fight it. Campos sighed deeply. Look, Hart, Evelyn is safe for the time being. Can't we at least celebrate that? Hardust dropped his head. Perhaps he had been ranting too much. His friend glanced at him. I'm sorry, Hardust cut him off before he could finish. No, you are right. It was a big win for us. The first win in a long time. He brought his head back up and forced a grin. Some celebration may be what I sorely need. Good, because we're here, Campos said, as the vehicle lurched to a stop. The apothecary would soon arrive to tend to Enwek's latest fascination. After only a day of walking through plains, the being had already developed a dreadful limp. For something that was bound to the ground, it didn't make any sense at all. Many aspects of this creature were so very strange. No claws, sharp teeth, or even acidic spit that the Veek had. Yet it was supposedly extremely dangerous. It didn't even look tough, lacking fur or hide. All of this made Enwek wonder what secrets lie beneath its unassuming exterior. One he was sure of was the creature's resolve. Even after nearly an hour of sitting across from it, it still stared at him with that same fiery glare. Those eyes were filled with a hatred Enwek had never seen before. If the being wasn't chained by the neck, it would take the soonest opportunity to kill him. This creature could not be of this world, but from hell itself. Or rather, that's what some of the more superstitious Veek would think. The tent flap opened and the apothecary walked in. He looked at the being, and then at Enwek. "I am here at your request, my lord." He dropped down to a knee and brought his wing across his chest. "How may I be of service?" Enwek pointed at the creature with a claw. "The demon has developed a limb. I fear he may not make it to Calic, let alone the capital. I want to make sure it is in good health for the Emperor." "As you will it, my lord." The apothecary then stood and approached the being. It reeled back at his advance, but it could not move far. The apothecary set his bag down beside it and crouched down. He opened the bag, pulling out instruments and medicines. The creature seemed to relax, as the apothecary did not touch any of the sharp tools. It processed the situation for a few moments before slowly reaching towards its foot coverings. Methodically, the creature untied the boot and carefully pulled it off. It then peeled off a cloth sleeve from its foot. The sight was dreadful. A large blister had formed on its heel, covering most of the appendage. The blister had been popped and the skin was already separating from the foot. Enwek felt ill at the sight. He wondered how it was even able to walk like that. No wonder it was limping so bad, he thought. The apothecary was quick to grab his tool and begin cutting away the separated flesh. The creature grimaced. The procedure was clearly painful. In a matter of minutes, the slicing was done, and the apothecary reached to his bag once more. He grabbed an assortment of herbs that he wrapped around the foot, finally securing it with a cloth. Once he was done with his treatment, he packed up his devices and turned to Enwek. "It needs time to rest and recover. If you force it to walk more than a day, it's likely it'll lose the leg." "These creatures seem quite fragile, if they're unable to walk a distance without considerable injury," Enwek said. The apothecary looked the creature up and down, inspecting it. "This one is covered in relatively soft flesh, not like the scales of our feet. Perhaps they were not meant to travel long distances. It would not surprise me if they used mimicry to lure their prey instead of tracking them." That comment made Enwek think. He had not heard the creature make any sort of vocalization. Probably it didn't want to reveal its ability to them if it was able. "Perhaps indeed. That will be all. You may leave now." The apothecary nodded before quickly disappearing out of the tent, leaving Enwek and the creature alone. He watched as it shoved its boot back on, studying every motion. It was intelligent, that was for certain. Perhaps it was more valuable than he had initially thought. Enwek decided that he would heed the apothecary's words, and leave him at the next settlement with a few of his personal guards. After all, he'd rather have a living specimen than a dead one.